You know, it's still warm outside, but it is approaching a good time for us to plant trees and shrubs. And today or tomorrow or perhaps this weekend, as you see on the site, would be a great time to plant. You know, we have some species that are deciduous here in the valley, which means they lose their leaves. They really don't go dormant here in the desert Southwest. They more rather slow down and begin to store energy. So they start building buds for the early spring. I've already started to see some of the ash trees that were losing their leaves with this recent warm weather start to build those buds back already again. But this is a good time of year to consider planting. And I'll just put a talk out there about pruning. I think we're going to talk about that perhaps a little bit later in the year, as well as planting. This is a great time to prune these trees that are going deciduous. It minimizes stress, helps the wounding to seal over. So just wanted to put that out there. But for right now, let's just talk about tree selection. Because here's what we're looking for, right? A very nice, healthy tree in front of behind one of our properties. You'll see here on the left, we have this nice cascalote that's in flower. If you look around the community right now, you will see they are starting to flower. Cascalotes flower through the winter with these really nice yellow panicles of color before they produce seeds. Birds love to nest in these trees. Actually, very nice, smaller tree for an urban landscape. And then on the right, though, you can't say that this jacaranda doesn't look beautiful in April and May when it flowers. So the reason I chose these two species is because they flower at different times of year. So when you're looking at tree selection and putting your landscape together in design, maybe you want to take that into consideration where you're spending time on your property and different types of color, different types of structure and texture at different times of year. So something to just think about as we move forward. So, I mean, why are we planting trees anyway? I think if you're on this call, you probably already have an idea of the benefits of trees, the environmental improvements, economic savings, and societal well-being benefits that trees provide for our community. I mean, we're fairly aware of environmental improvements, of stormwater runoff and air quality, good carbon sequestration, as well as economic savings for even our own homes. On energy bills, as well as our property values. If you own a business or a rental property, I'm sure you're aware if you have a nice maintained landscape and or healthy trees, your rents can be a little bit higher. Business, you get better walk-in business. That's the popularity of a lot of our outside malls. People tend to linger where there's trees, shade, nice landscape, and which that increases business. And then there's, of course, the health aspect and community safety. I mean, trees reduce our stress. I mean, this year, I've spent a lot of time outside doing what I consider forest bathing, reducing our stress. I mean, levels are high these days. People are kind of being inside, and you haven't been off on your own, but you go out into the yard or take a walk or a nice hike, and you just feel that mental fatigue kind of fade away as you get out amongst the forest and the trees. And it's just a good, you know, psychological benefit to be able to see green, see trees outside. Good for our health, good for our community, brings community together. And then, of course, there's the general aesthetic enhancements like this pear here, beautiful when it flowers in the spring. Brings the bees around and just promotes other wildlife habitat. So, I mean, the benefit of trees, we're well aware of. We just want to make sure we select the right tree for the right place. Because the whole thing is planting poor choices, it leads to expense in years after installation. And this is not just maintenance expense, but potential removal and even replacement. after you've had the tree in the ground for a number of years. Often we prune trees to fit our location that they've been planted in, instead of having selected a tree to establish its natural growth pattern and development. So, it can do what the tree wants, reach its genetic potential, and fit the space of which it's intended. So we like to design with mature tree development in mind. I mean, often in conceptual designs and plans, all these trees around our homes or by our driveways, honestly, they look very cute and cuddly, but then they do grow and mature, and sometimes they can bring infrastructural damage. So you want to consider the mature growth, but not just the branches above ground, but you got to remember the root development below ground, because there's some differences there that we're going to get into and talk about. I mean, the bottom line is you don't want the asset that the tree and the benefits of which we just talked about to become a liability for you on the property, or perhaps a future property owner. So just a few examples here. You can see this tree in this patio home here. You can see, if you see my mouse, it's been topped, and it's constantly being topped so it doesn't get too tall, as well as gets hanging low over the patio there, and so it's pruned from the bottom, pruned from the top. It's a nice tree, provides good shade and benefit, but it's a constant maintenance issue for this property owner. Perhaps another selection to provide the same benefits might have been more appropriate. And then, of course, you got the blue Palo Verde here. Everybody's familiar with that Arizona state tree. What a lovely specimen here. It's outside of an HOA. I mean, I work with a lot of HOAs here in the city to help them plan and develop their landscapes. And look how nice that is, flowering. There's plenty of setback and room for that to grow, not really overhanging the street or anything. But this also is a blue Palo Verde, if you can believe it, that was planted at a business property, but has to be pruned so they can have signage. It's kind of close to the sidewalk, and you can see that it did not survive. So it's kind of hard to believe that this beautiful blue Palo Verde and this dead blue Palo Verde are actually the same species. So again, just putting the right tree in the right place. Here on the left, you'll see some very nice red push pistache in a nice landscape, but look what they're planted under. And soon they're going to look more like this acacia on the right, where the utility is going to have to come in to clear their facilities. So that's something we're going to talk about a little bit more in the future here. And again, you have this sumac in a very small space out here by the bus stop. The only reason it's still alive is because the property behind it actually has a turf area, and so that's where all of the roots are. And then this pine on the right, I always say which came first, the pine or the pole. You can see you're having infrastructure damage here on the wall, as well as it's blocking the light up top. Definitely not the right selection for this Aleppo pine in this small space. Now here's a picture of a Dalbergia sisu. I like this species. I'm sure most of you are familiar with it. Not a tree I would plant in a patio home or a small backyard by any means. Has an extremely aggressive root system, very large growing crown, excellent shade, but for the right location. Here in a retention basin is a great place for this tree to be growing. That's more close to its native habitat, which is a riparian species. Beautiful, nice tree, provides great shade, and also helps take care of the water that's on the runoff from the parking lots. Here on the right, we've got a Texas red oak. Beautiful there in the front yard, plenty of space, a nice turf area, gets plenty of water, versus this Palo Brea on the right-hand side, which for some reason the homeowner felt was a little too large for the site. So didn't really think through the planting. when they put the palette together there. I mean, it's a nice desert landscape, but in my opinion, this Palo Brea has been totally destroyed. When you head and top back it like that, all the structure is gone, and the resprouts that are going to come out from that, if it even survives, is going to be a lot of maintenance going forward. So just a little on the right tree, right place. What I want to get into now is just matching the tree with the site. And so we want to talk about, different species need different requirements. You have temperature extremes, even here in the valley. We do get cold, and there is a chill and a frost every now and then. Different levels of light and shaded areas, depending on where it is around your property. You want to think about water and soil conditions, growing space. We're going to talk about that all throughout this session to make sure you have enough space available. Other conditions are like what's around it, the surroundings. Are your windows, streets, you got a lot of reflective heat? What kind of exposure do you have? Walls. I want to talk about the environmental conditions can determine whether the plants will thrive in a site or whether or not. That goes back to some of the shading and watering facilities. I mean, a lot of our properties, we have one valve or maybe two valves on our irrigation system that will water, all of our plants. And if we're adding trees that are maybe not compatible with the irrigation that you have set up for trees that are already there, you're going to maybe have to consider changing your emitters, upping or downing your gallonage or the number of emitters to make sure you're not over watering, which can be just as much of a problem even here in the desert Southwest. And we want to think about function. And with function, what is it? Why are you planting the tree in the landscape? Is it for shade? Are you creating a windbreak? Do you want to unblock? Do you want to block views? Is it that you want color? Do you want food? We'll talk about some of those species here at the end. You want to look at the texture and variety, interest. You want some diversity, not all of the same tree or plant there on your property. And so, all of this you want to make sure you have space for. Because if you plant a large tree in a small limited space, you're going to get a small stunted tree. And that's just the bottom line of what it is, right? So just, some graphic examples. If you're looking at your sun angles, if you're looking to shade portions of your house or maybe your sitting area around your yard, or either if you just want to screen off maybe your neighbors or perhaps a street side or a commercial facility that's behind you or beside you, and still provide some other benefits on your property. You just want to think about the species in the tree as you're matching it with the site, okay? A few more physical considerations than the environmental for our site is power lines. They're ubiquitous in our urban environment. You got to remember they can be overhead, they can also be underground, as well as our other facilities, cable, phone, gas lines, our water lines. You want to make consideration for those. Definitely get Blue State called in when you're working to dig on your property to make sure you're not having any conflicts. But as well as when back to planting with overhead lines, our utility providers have fairly strict regulations of what you can or should plant near utility lines, and you should have at least 10 foot of distance. That is both above and to the sides, or unfortunately, what the utility is going to end up coming and doing. They have a federal mandate to make sure their facilities are secure, so they're going to prune your tree for you, sort of like the one here in the picture. You also want to think about your sidewalks, your patios, your driveways, making sure how you're planting, how close it might be to them, what the rooting structure of this plant is, if it's going to be messy. We're going to talk about different plant parts here in a minute. You definitely don't want to plant a very messy. When I say that, I mean leaves and or fruits or something near your driveway or patio, that's going to cause you a lot of extra maintenance and cleanup. And then planting too close to your structures, whether it be an outbuilding on your property or perhaps your residence. Personally, I don't like to put any type of a tree type of species within 10 to 15 foot of my property. Now, I know you're looking for shade, of my home structure on the property, excuse me. I know you're looking for shading potential, but if you're getting closer than 10 foot, there could be a lot of extra maintenance opportunities that are going to come up in the future, as well as there could be some rooting issues depending on how your irrigation and other infrastructure is on your property. So something you just want to think about when you're planting. And it's the same as when those naturalized seeds that birds has helped deposit on your property for you. And all of a sudden you have a sprout that's coming up and you recognize it. It's an acacia tree, or it's a mulberry, or it might be a leucaena, or there's something, wow, this tree is growing. I didn't even have to plant it. Well, this is just great. I'm going to nurse it on. Sometimes they are really close to your fence line, by your driveway, by the back door, or something where the bird might have been perched or the seed could have blown in. So, I mean, you want to consider that, and before 5 years later, and it's gotten to be a problem and you have to remove it and it becomes a little bit more costly, you could have perhaps transplanted it or removed it there when it was a seedling. And then I want you to consider visibility near streets. I've visited a number of residents where they planted a beautiful tree right out by the street or by their driveway, or they lived on a corner, and the tree is doing quite well. But people are having trouble seeing around the corner where there's stop signs, or there's a stoplight or a street sign, or even backing out of their own driveway or pulling onto the street. They're having trouble with visibility, seeing oncoming traffic or pedestrians. And so again, this is going to lead to pruning the tree to fit in the space. And it's something I'm just asking you to consider when we're looking at our site, considerations. And I want you to be aware of microclimates. I know most of y'all are, but microclimates are a localized set of conditions that they can occur on your property that differ from the surrounding area or your neighborhood. Varies by shade, aspect, maybe even slope, moisture, the ability to the soil to dry out versus overwatering sometimes, and structures. I mean, a lot of microclimates people can build for their gardens and stuff in back, and you can do some very nice plants that generally would not grow here, but by altering your little climate there, you can grow different variety of species. But you want to be aware of that when you're selecting your trees that you want to plant, because some, if you're going with straight native desert species, that might not be the better location for it. So just something to be thinking about. And again, adequate space for the tree to achieve its genetic potential. You want to think of roots, not just above ground. And you want to look at your site for drainage opportunities. See how the water is draining when we do get rain. I do remember what that looks like. Sooner or later, it will rain again, and we can harvest that water and put to go around a lot of our trees or our fruit trees, or we can manage our landscape to take that water off of the property if desired. Personally, I like to harvest it and keep it on, but you want to make sure that you have that available opportunity to manage the drainage on the property. And depending on how old the property might be or where it's located, soil compaction could be an issue. If you're built on some old agriculture land, there are hard pans that once you start digging, all of a sudden at about 6 to 8 inches, you hit this really hard caliche layer or hard pan, and something you're going to have to work through as you're trying to plant trees. As well as there's often construction debris when you're planting around your yard, or just areas that might have been neglected by previous owners. If you're removing DG, that type of thing, just considerations that you want to look at that when you're selecting the tree. So now we'll talk about tree considerations. We looked at site. This is part of the right tree in the right place. We talked about the right place. So now let's talk about the right tree. Trees have different considerations. Some are more cold hardy, some are more heat tolerant. You have drought tolerance and water needs. Most of the trees that we're going to talk about today are on the low water use list. There's a few of my favorites that aren't on the list. I think it should be, but we'll talk about those. We want to talk about growth rate. People do like fast growing trees. That's what I always hear. I want a fast growing tree and I want instant shade. That's why people plant a lot of large box trees, which is fairly dear and does cost some money. Honestly, for me, the 15-gallon or the 24-inch box size tree is probably the best for a residential property, because it's not as big of a hole to dig, for one, and two, it gives the opportunity for the roots to start really growing into the site and the tree establishing. I'll plant a 24-inch box and a 48-inch box side by side. The 24 is going to catch up to it in size in about 2.5 years, and it's probably going to be a much better established tree. But so you want to look at growth rate. I want to get back to that, and fast growing trees. Fast growing trees are just that. They're fast growing. They are often weak wooded. They often have poor branch attachments with included bark. They tend to break easier in storms as well, and winds, as well as they require more maintenance. Faster growing trees are going to need to be pruned more often. So that's something you just got to think about when you're looking at fast growing trees. They also have some issues. We want to consider, like I said earlier, the mature size and form of the tree. As the question was about, they were looking for an Italian cypress, something that had a narrow growth form versus a wider growth form, which you might want to shade the front patio window or something like that. So you want to think of different forms and the mature size of the tree when you're making your selection. And you have different varietals of trees. Like not all desert willows are the same. Some have more seeds than others. They have different flower colors. They are more of a short structure than a tall structure. So, I mean, there's lots of different issues to consider. Same with disease and insect resistance. We don't have a lot of problems down here in the desert Southwest, but there are some species, I'll talk about one in particular here in a minute, that has less insect problems than others if you take the right variety. Let's talk about native versus introduced for a minute. I know a lot of people call me and they want to just do, well, all I want to plant is native species. I think native species are great. And when I'm talking about native, I'm talking about to Arizona. So there are native desert species like the mesquites, the palo verdes, the ironwoods, a few of the acacias, as well as the Arizona ash. But they're not all the same environment that is needed. And I do want to just mention, when we're in an urban site that has been transformed from what it used to be, we've altered the soils, we've changed microclimates. So a native might not always be the right or the best choice for your property. Just something I want you to consider. There are many introduced species and drought tolerant species that aren't native here, but do grow quite well here and are not problematic and can work within our plant palette quite well. And then I want to think about maintenance requirements. When we talked about it with growth rate, but sometimes you'll just put the tree in and then years later you'll find out, well, it's too shady, there's too much mess, too many flowers, I have too much pruning, or maybe just the opposite. Well, I really wanted this function and I didn't get it. So that's why we got to be really careful when you're choosing your species. So let's look at maintenance for a minute and look at the different types of plant parts that you need to consider when you're looking at your tree. The leaves, like I said, there's different types of shade. Real heavy, thick shade with trees with big leaves versus a filtered type of shade, more like a Palo Verde or a mesquite, different type of leaf structure, but that gives you different types of leaf litter as well. You have evergreens like our pines that provide some great shade, but you're going to have needles that are going to blow into the pool, or you're going to have cones that are going to fall and you're going to have to clean up. Versus deciduous trees that, they're going to drop leaves once a year. We have some that are semi-deciduous that, depending on how cold that it gets, they'll lose some of their leaves, but not all their leaves. Then we have like our evergreen oaks that, they'll keep all of their leaves during the year, but there could be some other issues I'll talk about here in a minute. So you want to think about leaves, okay? That's first. Then let's talk about the trunk and the branches. You want to think, well, what the structure is going to be. Is it going to be a single trunk or is it a multi-type trunk? When I say multi-trunk, it's usually either comes right out of the ground and there's 2 or 3, or it's a low breaking, which is within the first 2 foot, you have large branches that are coming off. Perhaps that's something that you're looking for. If you have a smaller space, maybe you just want the single trunk. So you want to look at the form. Some of that can be pruned. Some of it's just inherent in the species of which you're choosing. You want to think about bark type. There's smooth bark, there's rough bark, there's flaky bark. Bark can become messy. It can become a nuisance. And then you want to think about thorns and spines and prickles. A lot of trees that we have, our native species, have spines or thorns. A lot of them have prickles as well. Some do not. So, if that's going to be an issue near your driveway, near your walkway, although you might consider it a live fencing type of function that you want to keep between you and your neighbor, or if you have a bus stop, or you don't want people coming on the property, maybe you do want something with thorns or spines and prickles. So something to consider. Again, we talked about roots. Cindy had the question about sisu. Yes, you want to make sure you have enough space, because some roots on some species can be quite aggressive. Some of their structure, they extend out quite a bit. We're going to talk about roots here in a minute, versus, say, a palm species where the roots are a little bit more contained. And yes, there are some palms that do well here, some that do not. We're going to talk about that too. So, you want to look at the roots. There's a lot of like our ashes will have a lot of surface roots depending on how they're irrigated. They become trip hazards and can also damage some sidewalk or driveway areas. So things to consider. And then flowers and fruits. Back to the evergreen oak. Beautiful tree, keeps its leaves, but after about 5 or 6 years, it's going to have some acorns. So then you get acorns falling, and that's something that might become an issue for you. Some trees like the sweet acacia, I really do like the sweet acacia, beautiful flowers, but there is a smell and an odor that comes along with that. Any of you that have carob trees know what I'm talking about. That might not be something for you. So something you want to consider when you're choosing your species. And again, the types of litter and nuisance. Fruit, if you're not eating the fruit, all of a sudden you've got to pick up all this fruit. I've had residents that love their grapefruit tree, just love the fullness, and they like the flowers, couldn't stand the grapefruit. Hired people to come in every year when the grapefruit was ripe just to pick it and get rid of it, because they just did not want the fruit and didn't want to be a nuisance, didn't want to have, any insects or, potential animals around. So you want to think about that and consider that with part of your maintenance activity, as well as maybe you want something that provides you food. Something like a pineapple guava. I'm just pulling a species out that's a favorite of mine, has beautiful flowers that you can eat in your salads, as well as nice little fruits that you can eat straight out or use for baking. Nice little semi-deciduous small tree. But you want to know that going into it. That's kind of what I'm getting at. Make sure that we're all on the same page, right? So just talk about roots for a minute. Quick diagram, roots go very far beyond the canopy of the tree as long as they have space. Again, if you plant a large tree in a small space and a small hole, you're going to get a small tree. Most of the roots go down perhaps 3-4 feet. In our urban areas, the majority of them are in the upper 2 foot, and all the feeder roots are in the upper 12 to 18 inches of our soil. And so, I mean, roots grow where there is moisture and oxygen available. Roots do not sniff out water. Oh, water is over there on the side yard, we're going to grow there. The root does not know that. It goes where the immediate environment is conducive. So if there is good oxygen levels and adequate moisture, it will grow there. That's why even though roots will go under a foundation of a home, generally they do not. They will run along the stem wall, because when that foundation was poured, if you live on a slab, that soil was compacted to standards to hold the pour. So there's very little oxygen in there. The percentage levels are most likely lower than 3%. So there's no reason for the root to grow there. Now, and there's no real moisture under there. Now, if you have a slab leak or a crack in the foundation, yes, or you have a hose bib or a air conditioner condensate line that's right there by a crack on your foundation, yes, you're creating the environment and the root is going to exploit that. Sidewalks and driveways, patios, there's always that 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch that's right under the concrete before you get to the soil. It's like a little vapor area. Moisture gets in there, there's oxygen available. That's why roots will grow in that area and start to push up and can heave those surfaces. But back to it, you know, roots extend laterally, considerable distance beyond the drip line, and it's more, root development is more a function of the environment and the opportunity for them than more of their genetics. So, talked about trees and selecting the right tree for the right place, the site, the species. So you've decided upon the species that you want. So now you're going to the nursery. So honestly, I never let this nursery select for me. You want to go and look for your plant material. It helps with the process. You're picking it out, you're bringing it home, it's yours, you're going to care for it, right? So what you're looking for is healthy, vigorous growth. You want to make sure that the foliage is evenly distributed around the tree, that there's some taper. It doesn't look like necessarily a pole coming straight out. We're going to talk about that here in a minute. You want to look for good branch spacing and size. If you're not buying a multi-trunk tree and there's a very large branch coming off and it's more than half the diameter of the main trunk of the tree, you're probably going to need to prune that off in the near future because it's not going to have good structure and balance. So maybe in the nursery, that's not the tree for you. You want to look for other defects as well, like included bark, things like that. Make sure there's no insects or disease on the tree. You don't want to bring that home. Most of our nurseries are pretty good about that, but you might find something here and there. No mechanical damage, and you want to look for the root flare. When I talk about the root flare, I'm talking about when you have trees in containers, you know, the nurseries will often put a lot of mulch up on top. So, you know, they're retail, they're trying to sell the product, so they're dressing that up. Like here, there was like 3 inches of extra mulch before I got to the flare. And if you're looking for the flare, you're looking for where there's a girdled root, like you can see right here. This is not a tree that I would bring onto my property and not one that I would buy. Or if it was delivered, honestly, I would be rejecting it. You're going to have to be doing some root pruning on that. That's going to girdle the tree over a period of time, and it's not just going to be good structural development. You want to be able to look at the roots. You see some nice white fleshy roots here that are just sign of good healthy growth. And when you're planting this tree, you want to tease these roots out a little bit, not just slide it from the container into the hole. that you want to tease that out so that the roots stop growing in the circular pattern there in the container, and they start to spread out into your property, actually. And the nursery should not be wary of you digging around just a little bit around the crown of the tree to find the root collar. And if they are, honestly, there's another nursery you need to go to, okay? These are some tree species that are good for smaller spaces. When I say smaller spaces, I'm talking about at least a 15 by 15 to a 20 by 20. And this is going to be the height and the crown spread of the tree. I'm sure you're familiar with the mulga. A cousin of that is a leatherleaf acacia, one of my favorites. It has a shorter, rounder, thicker leaf than the mulga, still some really nice yellow flowers. It does drop some seeds, but it's a really nice screening tree that'll get up to about 15 foot. The orchid has some really nice flowers, one of the better orchids for around here, native of Mexico and Central America, does quite well here. The Mexican bird is a nice yellow flowering tree. It has kind of more of a gangly type of form, so it'll fit more in a narrower area, but it can produce some seed pods as well. Desert willows, we mentioned those, all different shapes, sizes, varieties, colors of flowers. Bubba is one of my, and Desert Diva are two of my favorite varieties just because they have that really vivid purple color and a darker green leaf. The Texas olive, the Cordia bozieri, white flowers, yellow throats, really nice, great screening type small tree, but it does produce some small type fruits, great for birds, bad for your patio if you don't want to sweep it up all the time. Just something to consider. Texas mountain laurels, two varieties. There's the green leaf and the silver leaf. As I mentioned earlier, they both have beautiful purple flowers. Kind of smells like bubble gum or grape soda. But the green leaf variety often has caterpillar damage in the springtime, where honestly, the silver leaf doesn't really seem to see so much caterpillar damage. So if you're looking at a Texas mountain laurel, something that you might want to consider. Little leaf ash, not planted a lot around here. Very nice, no mess, semi-evergreen tree, great for around a pool in the back, give you some good shade. Some more smaller space trees, the guaiacum, just extremely exquisite orchid-shaped purple flowers, kind of a gnarly desert type structure, not really thorny or spiny, can make a nice small tree or a big shrub. The feather bush, the Lysoloma, good sized tree, will get a little bit of mess out of it when the seed pod falls, but a very nice shade tree. Palo Blanco, great along driveways, nice wispy, has very characteristic kind of appealing bark, very attractive. Fits in a nice small narrow space quite well, very filtered shade. The mastic, evergreen, no nonsense, no mess, beautiful little tree. Can get up to about 20-25 feet. Really takes to a pruning, whatever pruning you want to throw at it, to be honest with you. If you're really into topiary, mastic will handle your need there in that function. Really nice little tree, very responsive to pruning and low water use, great for our properties here in the valley. Cascalote, so a picture of that earlier, one of my good favorites. Beautiful winter flowering, great for birds. They have prickles along the trunks. You can get a prickleless, they call it thornless varieties as well. Arizona rosewood, I think that's highly underrated and underused here. Definitely a replacement for oleanders. Nice white plumes and flowers in the spring. Nice evergreen growth. The Vitex pepper, of course, different colors of purple shades flower. They do get a little naked, shall we say, in the wintertime when they drop leaves and look a little bare, but boy, they come back out in the springtime, just fantastic color. If you're looking for something larger, when I'm talking about that, I'm larger than 25 to 25. Usually I'm up into the 30s with this in height and above. The acacia species, you're familiar with the willow and the shoestring. Canyon hackberry, I think could be used a lot more in our landscapes, a little on the slow for growing, but really characteristic shape, has a little bit of warty type growth on the bark and the branches. Good wildlife bird habitat. Dalbergia siso, again, great shade tree, just be sure to give it space. Sort of like the Eucalyptus microtheca, the coolabah. A lot of people will say, why are you even talking about eucalyptus? They have a place here. They are drought tolerant. If you've got back 40, you need a good shade tree, no utilities around. I'm going to say this species of eucalyptus can provide you some good benefit. Different mesquites. We have numerous varieties here in the valley. Most of them have hybridized. You can get them from thornless to seedless. Some of them are more evergreen than others. Just be prepared if you're planting mesquite that provides seed pods. Unless you're going to make some bread and get some flour out of it, you're going to have seed pods everywhere. Something that you need to consider. Olives, I put the fruitless olive on here. It's just a great no mess tree. Most of you are familiar with fruiting olives. I like the fruitless olive if you're not looking for anything that's messy. It's very low maintenance, very strong structure, great for your patio. And of course, ironwood. You gotta love an ironwood. The flowers are great. If you like to eat the beans, very tasty. I can give you a good recipe for that if you want to contact me offline. More of our medium-sized trees, all of our Parkinsonias, the Palo Verdes fall into this category. The blue Palo Verde, Palo Brea. The little leaf, not going to find a lot of those in our neighborhoods. They're more of a strict in our preserves, or if you have a really nice desert landscape, they are slow growing, but a very nice addition. Most people are buying the desert museums, which I will go out with my opinion and say my opinion only. Desert museums are a tough tree around here. They grow very fast. They do not stand up to storms very well. You've got to be prepared for breakage and a lot of maintenance because they do grow so fast. They do have beautiful flowers and they will be messy in that regard. Our pistaches, you got the Chinese and the red push. You see them all around the valley. Pretty stalwart trees in our plant palette here. The only thing that's going to give you a good red color in the fall. Very nice trees, fairly low maintenance once you get them established. Quercus, our evergreen elms, our evergreen oaks. You have your live oak, your escarpment oak, your chinkapin. Your chinkapin will drop its leaves here. But those are three good oak varieties depending on your needs, big, kind of a medium, and different shape type oaks. I'm going to finish up with the tipu, beautiful yellow flowers. A lot of people don't like the yellow on the ground, but very nice tree, very easy to maintain, as long as you prune it when it's about 3 to 4 years old, because it will start to have a codominant stem. You've got to take one of those off and it'll form a beautiful canopy tree. Texas ebony, as long as you don't over prune it. It does have spines on it. You have some black pods that will fall, but it does provide good shade, good bird nesting habitat as well. Evergreen elm, as long as you got it in a turf area, I'm very happy with this tree. Great performance, great shade. It will struggle in granite or next to a street or in front of a reflective big window. You're just going to have to make sure that you give it extra water. And of course, the sweet acacia, we talked about that a little bit. It's a nice, good desert species. I threw one palm in here. People do like palms. So I give you the Mexican blue palm, the Brea. That is just a nice alternative to fan palms and or date palms, in my opinion. They don't grow quite as tall, but the plumage on when it comes out, that fluorescence of just this white, against the blue-gray leaves or fronds it's just fantastic. It does require some space. You're not going to see queen palms on my list. Queen palms are hard to grow here in the valley. I can talk to you long about queen palms as I can about sisu. So if you have extra questions about those, contact me offline and we'll move that direction. So with that, just a couple of resources. The Desert Landscaping School at the Botanical Gardens and the book that they have there is a great reference for design, for irrigation, for plant selection, and for installation. And then as well as the sustainable landscape maintenance practices from the Arizona Landscape Contractor Association, so that we can maintain our properties in a more sustainable manner. Again, here's some references that I'm sure Tina can provide to you if you need online. We've got the AMWA list, great plant reference. This ASU list put out by Dr. Martin has, if you want to look up plants really quick, shrubs, trees, nice reference material. Select a Tree out of Cal Poly has good information on what trees need in their resources. And then if you're looking at maintenance type activities, Trees Are Good, the Arbor Day Foundation, iTree Tools, the Arizona Community Tree Council, and the Landscape Contractor Association are all great references. So with that, Tina, I am back to you so you can talk about more of the rebates and resources that water conservation in Tempe can provide, and then we can maybe come back and do a little bit more Q&A as required.
Yes, thank you, Richard. I don't know about the rest of you, but I am inspired to plant some trees. That was an excellent presentation, and I'll just talk about a few resources that Tempe provides to help you learn more or implement or follow up on some of that inspiration that Richard has provided, including the first one is TreeBait. This is an amazing incentive. It's very flexible. And so if you want to go plant some trees and you plant a desert adapted tree, you can qualify for a rebate up to $75 per year per household. And if you, thought about and reflected on right plant, right place, and you realize you don't have space for another tree, you can also get this rebate for desert adapted shrubs and ground cover. But I want to harken back to what Richard said. The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. So be sure to start with the trees if you have the space for this rebate. You can always qualify for adding shrubs and ground cover to the single family residential property through this incentive, as long as it's in Tempe. Wanted to mention on that same website, we have links to brochures, and I even learned some more today through Richard. So I'm going to add links to additional resources that he has on his website or on his presentation slide, and we'll make sure to send that through email to those of you who've attended the class, just so you have it handy. But if you lose the email or at any point are looking for some of these really good vetted resources on just how to conserve, how to be efficient, and also how to use horticulture best practices in the landscape, these resources are always provided in the free brochures or the water conservation blog sections of our website. And the very last thing that I will pitch among our many programs that we offer Tempe customers here is the Water Smart portal, just because it is so neat and it is so unique in that we're the only city that offers it in combination with a fully automated metering system. So if you sign up for the Water Smart customer portal, you can access your hourly water data. You can get access to high water use alerts. You can get access to high bill alerts. If we have another amazing workshop planned in partnership with Richard, we'll even have emails that go out that kind of talk about upcoming changes to programs and neat rebates and things like that. So definitely sign up. I think one of the coolest things to me is just the ability to see if you have any leaks or to see where your water is going. It's a great resource, tempe.gov/watersmart.